This will be a shorter video. We'll talk about how muscles contract and some terms to know. Iso means the same. And now we add a second part to the word. If I'm isometric, I'm the same length. I measure the same. And some examples that they give is like holding a weight where the arm doesn't move, but like doing a plank position, if you're familiar with that in yoga, or a wall squat where you just lean against the wall, bend your legs, and try to sit there. And at first, like, oh, this is easy. And after about 10 seconds, you start to feel the work. And after a few seconds, your legs are shaking. You're not moving, but the muscle length is staying the same, but the tension is increasing. Another way I think about isometric contraction is holding like if you pick up an aluminum can, and if you increase tension, you would crush that can, but you have just enough strength in your fingers to hold that can without crushing it. Isometric. The muscle stays the same length. The opposite of that, or maybe another category, is isotonic. And with this one, the tone stays the same, but the length changes. So isotonic is when movement is happening. It results in movement. And two main ways to see that: if I'm concentrically doing isotonic contraction, my muscles are shortening. Concentric, things are getting more concentrated. Versus if I'm eccentrically working a muscle, that muscle is actually lengthening. So if I'm eccentric, they're exaggerating. I love this picture here. This baby weighs the same thing, right? Here they're just holding the baby. The baby weighs the same amount while they're holding it. They're just putting enough tension in their arms to hold this baby, right? Enough tension is generated to do the work, but the muscles are truly not shortening. No movement is occurring. Here we can do two types of movement. They're holding the baby out in front of them. They could bring the baby toward them chest. They could bring the baby toward their chest. In order to do that, this muscle would get shorter, and it would be a concentric contraction. Or maybe they're going to lower this baby down onto a changing table or something, maybe into a crib. So then the muscle would get longer. And as they're lowering the baby down, they would be doing an eccentric contraction. Concentric and eccentric, both of these are isotonic contractions. We're causing movement. If we were doing isometric, there's no movement. Putting these into graph form, these graphs are real complicated, and it's because we're looking at different things. Here we're looking at the tension in the muscle, and here we're looking at the length in the muscle. If I'm doing an isometric contraction, I keep the same muscle length, and the tension changes. If I'm doing a concentric or an eccentric muscle, here I have the same amount of tension in there, but those lengths are changing. Concentric, the muscle gets shorter. Eccentric, the muscle gets longer. Those isometric contractions, an example of this is like when somebody's in childbirth and they're bearing down, they're pushing all this muscle, and at first nothing is moving, right? So that's a sustained isometric contraction. Or this is kind of gross, but little kids, when they learn to like pass gas on demand, to start off farting is a sustained isometric contraction of the abdomen and some trunk muscles. Maybe holding your breath in the middle of an exercise to try to get a little bit more strength. I'm doing a sustained isometric contraction. The danger of this is it can actually increase it does increase blood pressure at times. In the real world, this can happen with cold exposure, and this is one of the concerns. Ice baths are becoming more and more common, but ice baths, somebody plunges in the cold, and there is definitely some great therapeutic benefits to that with the musculoskeletal system, but a sudden plunge in the cold, especially if I'm not doing it right and don't know a process to build up some tolerance to this, it can definitely increase blood pressure, and it's a concern. Other examples like isometric contraction, they talk about shoveling, but that's the idea that if you're truly shoveling, like shoveling snow, I'm probably keeping my arms close into me. I'm doing much more isometric contraction than I am throwing my arms around, and all of that's going to increase blood pressure as well. We're switching gears into what's called a length tension relationship. And here's the big idea of this. If there's a rubber band, that rubber band has so much strength. But if I take that rubber band and stretch it out, it has a lot more length, and it's going to have a lot more tension to it. And if this rubber band was like no tension at all. It has less length and less tension. That's the idea. Let's get our words. The best way to generate force is however long the muscle is when it's at rest. Fiber's resting length is the true maximum contraction. Because when at rest, we've just got just the right amount of overlap in the thick and the thin. Everything is where it's supposed to be. When a muscle has a shortened length, it has a weaker force. And the same thing, if a muscle gets stretched, it has a weaker force. But again, it's the idea that this muscle, when a muscle is at rest, it has the right amount of tension. Think about this rubber band. There's a lot more tension here, but this rubber band is much more likely to break, right? And if your muscle's broke, every time you contract, you've got a problem. So when is the most maximum contraction from a muscle? When it's at its resting length. Here we're trying to see that in the same graph here. If a muscle is stretched, it has less tension to it. If a muscle is contracted, it can generate less tension. When a muscle's at its resting length is when it can generate the most tension. To try to put this in the real world, this is why like sometimes when you reach behind you, maybe you're driving a car or you're in the front seat, you reach back behind you to get a backpack and you're stretching out your muscles and it's hard to lift that backpack. Versus if the backpack was there on your, right in front of you in a good position, it's much easier to lift it. Does that kind of make sense? If you stretch the muscles into a weird position, they have less strength. They have less muscle tension. Eventually, this muscle is going to reach fatigue. And here's a great definition to know. Fatigue is the reduced ability to produce muscle tension. Most commonly, especially if there's no pathology, it's because I ran out of that glycogen, right? That was that extra energy I had stored inside the muscle there. But some other problems can come up where the nerve meets the muscle, or that neuromuscular junction. Maybe the synaptic vesicles, or maybe there's a neurotransmitter problem. I could also have fatigue early because of that coupling. Remember, thick grabbed thin and pulled it in, and all of that involved calcium. And then the third one literally is that cross bridging. Remember, it takes ATP for the thick to let go. And all of that was that phosphate. So any of those could lead to extra fatigue. Just to share, there's different pathologies going on with all of this, right? If I have some nervous system damage, maybe I have problems with excitation, or I'm not able to stimulate the muscle. Some autoimmune disease pathologies attack different things that can associate with these. A little bit more. What happens if we start exercising? What's the effects of exercise? Well, definitely endurance exercise, and we could just oversimplify and say exercise for 30 minutes or more. If I train for endurance, my body gets better at endurance. My body literally, I'm going to develop more mitochondria, and the mitochondria work better. Another type of exercise is resistance exercise. A term for this could be like weight training, although maybe it's cables, or maybe it's stretch bands, TheraBands, or even body weight exercises could be considered, like pull-ups and sit-ups could be resistance exercises. Watch these terms, especially if you do weight training. You want hypertrophy. You want the trophy to show off your muscles. Hypertrophy means the cells get bigger. A contrast to that is hyperplasia. And hyperplasia is where we get more cells. And you really don't go through hyperplasia unless you're working out while you're an embryo or a fetus or 1 year old. Most of the time, definitely by my age, I'm not dealing with hyperplasia. Here's a normal cell. Here is hypertrophy. I'm putting the T there for hypertrophy. And if we don't exercise, muscles get smaller around. And so that's an example of atrophy. The difference is, if I'm doing hyperplasia, I see I used the wrong color, but hyperplasia is where I'm getting more cells. And again, that's much more in embryonic development. If I'm exercising, I'm getting bigger muscles, getting hypertrophy. If I stop exercising, or maybe I'm injured and have to wear a cast or have some kind of surgery where you can't walk for a while, I have atrophy. Sometimes it's reversible, sometimes it's irreversible. As we age, muscle mass goes away, said the guy that's getting older. Oh, yes, I could see it in my 30s, but now I'm actually, I turn 53 next week. Woohoo! And definitely I see, number one, my endurance. I have to work out. I cannot work out as long as I used to work out. And even though I continue to work out, My muscles are smaller and have a little bit less power than they used to have, especially equivalent to how hard I work out. As we age, we have less oxygen storing capacity, and that has to do with our endurance, being able to exercise longer, or maybe even walk further from the parking lot to the car, parking lot to the store, something like that. And unfortunately, as we age, we have less circulatory supply. Literally, there's less blood going through. It also takes longer to recover, whether it's just from a workout or definitely from an injury. Remember when we were developing as an embryo, not all of the myoblasts turned into muscles. Some of them hung out as made little satellite cells. And as we age, we have less satellite cells to do that repair. And a common thing that happens with lots of different pathologies is fibrosis. Fibrosis, just think about scar tissue. In 224, we'll talk about there's even like lung fibrosis or pulmonary fibrosis, but in the muscle system, the muscle cells are replaced by scar tissue or dense regular connective tissue. And the problem is then I have less flexibility. The muscle is supposed to be able to stretch and contract, and scar tissue does not. Tie in with this some terms. Remember, anabolic, that was the opposite of catabolic. Remember, catabolism was breaking things down. If I'm anabolic, I'm building things up. And there's several types of chemicals that fall in the category of anabolic steroids, but most of them relate to the way your body processes testosterone. And anyone of any gender can process testosterone. And yes, in the U.S., there's a prescription for this. There's also lots of products who advertise themselves that they're like in the chemical pathway. It's illegal to sell steroids, but at least what they advertise is it's the stuff your body uses to make steroids. More importantly, it's what your body uses to control how much muscle or muscle proteins that we're building. Without a doubt, any type of anabolic steroid increases muscle size, gives that hypertrophy. But as we've seen, as muscles, especially as they contract, it starts to cause pressure like heart disease or blood pressure, possibly even a stroke. All of the kidneys and liver treat this like a normal endocrine system chemical message. They think it's testosterone, and so it really taxes these organs. There is shrinking of testicles, testicular atrophy, and both males and females have effects of this. We'll talk much more at the end of 224. In males who start taking testosterone, especially for an extended period of time, breasts can develop, and actually false lactation. It looks like lactation, but it's definitely a different thing. In the skin, in the integument system, acne and red coloring tends to happen, especially with higher doses of testosterone and aggressive behavior. And anyone could grow facial hair or hair where it's not typically grown. And if I'm female and my body's used to estrogen, then I'm really going to have some menstrual irregularities. All right, everybody, hang in there. We've just got one video left of this chapter.